CTA is a call to action to all conservatives to save America from left-wing radicals.
Nearly 45% of the U.S. workforce already have plans for job hopping in 2021. Now, many of those 70 million job hoppers are just fed up and they're ready to work somewhere else, somewhere where they will be free. Maybe it's time for your talents to go to a city or a company that actually values your freedom. Post your resume on redballoon.org so that you can connect with this ever-growing list of free speech employers who would love to hire you.
Every year in the United States, political conservatives gather for an event called CPAC, Conservative Political Action Conference. Conservative activists and elected leaders meet to discuss strategies for winning political office, to exchange conservative ideas, and to listen to inspiring speeches. The first CPAC was in 1974. The most recent one was at the end of February this year in Orlando. Traditionally, there's also a straw poll taken as to who would win the next presidency. President Trump won the poll. Among the crowd who attended the conference was a well-known conservative leader and Catholic priest known for his activism in the pro-life movement. Most likely you've seen him from his numerous media appearances and from his marching for life every year to the Supreme Court. He is a pro-life Catholic clergy activist, always speaking for the most vulnerable, the unborn. At the beginning of Lent this year, Lent, which is marked on a Wednesday called Ash Wednesday, Father Pavone called on all people to reject evil. But to those particular believers who are still members of the Democrat Party, to leave the party. In other words, give it up for Lent and for good. He said, quote, "Those believers who are still members of the Democrat Party, leave that party. Its platform, its leaders, and the policies they advance have explicitly embraced a worldview that promotes the direct, deliberate, and systematic killing of children in the womb, without exception, and at taxpayer expense. Views the freedom of religion as discrimination, punishes believers and the church institutions for trying to live their faith, and redefines human sexuality, marriage, and family in ways that contradict God's plan. The party also denies the rights of parents as the primary educators of their children, just to name a few problems with the party. Those who don't see this need to read the platform and read the bills the leadership is promoting," unquote. I'm Terry Gilberg, and this is Timeline with Terry, and today's Timeline topic, giving up the Democrat Party. I'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, CEO of MyPillow. Retailers, shopping channels, and now even banks have tried to cancel myself and MyPillow. During these times, your support has meant everything to us. My employees and I want to personally thank each and every one of you by passing the savings directly on to you. For example, you can get my Giza Dream bed sheets for as low as $39.99 a set. That's a savings of 60% and the lowest price in history. And remember, they're made with the world's best cotton, grown where the Sahara Desert, the Mediterranean Sea, and the Nile River all meet. They come with my 10-year warranty, and I guarantee they'll be the most comfortable sheets you'll ever own. So go to mypillow.com now and use the promo code on your screen or call the 1-800 number below to get my Giza Dream bed sheets for as low as $39.99, the lowest price in history. If you do it right now, I'm also going to include a free gift with your purchase. Thank you and God bless.
The principles of liberty, freedom, and the tenets of our constitutional republic are under attack. That's why we are building freedomsquare.com. Freedomsquare.com, designed to unite freedom-loving Americans. Freedomsquare.com. Freedom lives here.
Are you tired of having to grunt, wince, and sigh every time you sit down on the couch? Omekwa Organics has got you covered with the Protected Tea, an organic herbal blend for inflammation, immunity, and heart health. Naturally boost your immune system and reduce stress. So get on up and dance, because you know that Omekwa Organics has got you protected. Visit our link in the description for money off your first bag of Protected Tea.
Charlize, luxury skincare for real women, because you're worth it.
Grits and Eggs Breakfast Kitchen, where every dish has fresh and delicious farm-to-table ingredients that are sure to uplift your taste buds. Experience our creamy grits topped with grilled shrimp and our homemade shrimp sauce. Try our fried whole chicken wings or our marinated lamb chops cooked to your perfection. Come try Costa Coffee. It's the best coffee you've never tasted. Grits and Eggs Breakfast Kitchen, located at 3205 Cumberland Boulevard, Southeast, Suite 105 in Atlanta. Grits and Eggs Breakfast Kitchen. Enter as strangers, leave as friends. Cheers.
Welcome back to Timeline with Terry, where I invite expert guests on and give them real time to explain their positions on the real hot topics of our day. The issue of life is certainly a top topic. It has been for years, but this year in particular, 2022, might be the year where we see the issue of abortion become a matter for the states as we await the Supreme Court's ruling on Dobbs versus Mississippi. I'll be discussing this court case with Father Frank Pavone, who has dedicated his entire ministry to ending abortion. He is the National Director of Priests for Life, the largest pro-life religious council, and he travels throughout the country on an average of 4 states a week, preaching and teaching against abortion. He broadcasts daily to hundreds of thousands of people on television and radio, and we on this program are honored to have him now. Welcome, Father Frank Pavone. Nice to see you.
Hello, Terry. It's great to see you too. Thanks so much for having me on for this important discussion.
Well, the first thing I want to say, you're very welcome. And the first thing I want to say, as of this taping, Florida had a win today. And what was the win in Florida for the life issue, Father? Let's start off right there.
Yes, our legislature passed the same kind of law that Mississippi passed a few years ago, and which is now being reviewed by the Supreme Court in the case you just mentioned. And it's a law that protects babies in the womb starting at 15 weeks. Now, that kind of a law is a direct challenge to what the courts have been saying for 50 years now, that you can't protect babies in the womb prior to viability. Florida is joining a number of other states in pushing back against that and saying, listen, we have the right to protect the babies in our own state when we, the elected representatives of the people, decide that that's what we need to do, and our governor agrees as well. So that was indeed a victory. We look forward to Governor DeSantis signing that bill into law.
And the reason why I mentioned Florida for our audience, you hail from Florida and your office headquarters are in Florida.
Exactly.
And to that note, since you mentioned other states, it's my understanding, if I've done my study right, Arizona also, Mississippi, Texas, Oklahoma, and now Florida. Are there others that are around the 15-week to 16-week period?
Yeah, Arkansas has passed some pretty strong legislation as well, protecting the babies around 12 weeks. And of course, this legislation in these various states gets tied up in court very easily. But we've seen, of course, a great victory in Texas, where the law has been in effect since September 1st, protecting babies all the way from approximately 6 weeks into the pregnancy. So great progress is being made.
I think that's terrific. All right, let's get back to how I teed up our exchange today. The message to leave the Democrat Party, a very appropriate one, I think, echoing the call of Lent, and for our Christian brothers and sisters, particularly Catholic brothers and sisters who are listening, Lent, to turning away from sin and be faithful to the gospel. I personally really liked your message on Ash Wednesday. The message, of course, Father would point to our current president and our current Speaker of the House and other Democrat leaders. They're not really doing this vis-a-vis the life issue. In fact, I think this particular administration and this particular team, President and Vice President, actually doubled down for the pro-choice, or shall I say, pro-abort side rather than for life. And yet our president is a Catholic. He's a member of the family.
You know, I appreciate you pointing this out. We were just talking about what Florida just did, and just today, Biden tweeted against what Florida did. He was complaining how terrible this is. We will not stand for this, he said. Stand for what? The protection of little babies from literally being torn apart limb from limb while they're still alive? I mean, it's so upside down. It's so inside out. And you know, what you took notice of, Terry, in terms of what I said for the beginning of Lent, let's put it in context. We at Priests for Life work together across the nation with millions of people who identify themselves as members of the Democrat Party, but who are very faithful, very pro-life. And I want to make sure that my message here is seen as an affirmation of them, not a denigration of them. I'm not looking down at them. I know that they are honest enough, courageous enough, pro-life enough to realize, as most of them do, although not all, that the Democrat Party no longer represents them. That's the point. As you're pointing out, it's the leadership that is failing them. It's not representing pro-life Americans. It's the leadership not representing the meaning of the faith that so many grassroots Catholics embrace. And that's what's so offensive about what Biden and Pelosi are doing when they say claiming to be devout Catholics. There are Catholics all across America who are sacrificing so much every day to live out their faith. And they are making serious sacrifices. Sometimes it costs them their reputation and their job and their friends. And here you've got people who are throwing some of the teachings out the window, and they're pretending that they can get the support of Catholic people across the country. It's an insult to the faith, and it's an insult to our nation when they take a stand in favor of the kind of violence that abortion represents.
Well, the other thing that I wanted to also point out, I know you'll agree with me, it's not just the leadership, it's the platform, Father, itself that is laid out. And with that, there are Catholics, because I know of them, that sort of say, well, President Biden, he's Catholic and he's for this. Or I talk to my local priest and, you know, pro-choice is just fine anymore. And, you know, hey, so there's this squishiness, shall I say. There's this sense of it's okay, or relativism, or, you know, it is my body, my choice after all. And these are some of the things that our side has to fight against. And it's an uphill battle.
You know, Terry, what you just pointed out is exactly our point. Namely, that when a highly positioned Catholic takes positions contrary to the faith, that causes scandal.
Yes.
What you just described is exactly what we mean by scandal. And unfortunately, even some church leaders, even some clergy, seem to have forgotten what scandal is. But it's in our tradition. It's in the scriptures. It's when you do something that makes somebody else, it makes it more easy for someone else to sin, or confuses them about the difference between sin and virtue. So when people say, oh, well, you know, he's a Catholic, so it must be okay, that's scandal. You're leading someone to think that something's okay, which is not okay. We're not interested in creating a theocracy. I don't care what religion a candidate is, because when I decide to vote for or against a candidate, I'm not electing a pastor. I'm not interested, really. I don't care if they don't even tell me what their religion is, because they're supposed to be carrying out the duties of their office as their office is defined in the Constitution and as the virtues of public service require it. And one of those virtues that public service requires, first of all, is that you serve the public instead of killing the public. So it does not allow for the killing of the innocent by abortion. But the other thing public service requires is integrity, honesty. If you're going to claim to be something, then be it. But if you disagree with what you claim to be, at least have the honesty to say, you know, Biden, I would respect Biden more if he would stand up and say, and Pelosi too, if they would say, listen, I know the Catholic Church is against abortion. On this point, we diverge. On this point, we seriously disagree. I have a different position on abortion. But they don't say that. They try to make it look like it's totally compatible with their faith.
They do. I've heard of, though, I remember Senator Kennedy, Edward Kennedy, when pressed on this. And God rest his soul, this was a while back. But this issue, Father, came to the head one day with him, and I saw an interview, and he straddled the fence. That's how I would describe it. Kind of saying, well, you know, my job in public office is to serve all the people, and they come from all different faith lives, or no faith life. But privately, I'm against abortion. So they get away with it, I guess. And I think Pelosi does that. And the other day, in fact, while we're on this subject, recently Joe Biden was asked about abortion. And, Father, it was on Ash Wednesday, the day after the State of the Union, the day of Ash Wednesday. I even grabbed the quote. He said to the reporter, I don't want to get into theology with you, as he said behind his Ray-Bans with the cross on his forehead, as if, are you for killing in the womb or not? And he wanted to make it a big theological thing, and I don't have time for theology. So they ebb and flow, they dodge and weave, they straddle the fence. Do they not?
You know, interestingly, and that reporter was asking him about Roe v. Wade. Interestingly, Roe v. Wade itself tried to a large extent to make it about theology. And this is the strange thing we see. And I've been dealing with the abortion issue full time for 30 years now. And I'll tell you what, the abortionists and their proponents over-spiritualize this issue. They are too spiritual. Some people say, oh, well, you know, they're killing babies. They must not be spiritual at all. No, they're too spiritual. What I mean by that is, let me use an anecdote. I was speaking with an abortionist one time, a late-term abortionist, and I try to talk with them a lot. And he practices partial birth abortion, where the baby is killed in the birth canal, while the baby's coming out. And I said, look, how do you justify doing this? You know that this is a baby. Mm-hmm. And this doctor says to me, yes, I know it's a baby, but I don't know when the baby gets a soul. So here I am talking to him about a medical
I would have said,
procedure.
Do you have a soul?
Yeah, right. So I'm talking to him about a medical procedure. Here I am, the priest, talking about medicine, and the doctor's talking to me about souls and about theology. I said, look, my response to him was, what difference does that make? So what? How do you know that the newborn has a soul? Does that give you the right to kill the newborn? What if you don't think I have a soul? Does that give you the right to kill me? Here's the point. When we call for the protection of the unborn, we're not asking people to believe anything. I don't care what Biden thinks about theology. He can have whatever theology, philosophy, religion, cult, worship, whatever he wants. I don't care about his theology. I care about him as a public servant protecting the public. And he's not doing that. Let's go back to the Kennedy quote, which it was great that you reminded us of that. I want to protect all the people. I want to serve all the people. I want to represent all the people. And a lot of these pro-abortion politicians, they use that same line to this day.
They sure do.
And our response to that is, that's what we're trying to say to you. You're not representing all the people. You're killing a whole segment of the people. What about the people in the first 9 months of life? You're not representing these babies. You're pretending as if they don't exist. You're pretending as if they're not persons at all. In fact, that's exactly what Roe v. Wade says. The word person does not include the unborn. Right. By what right do you even say that? These are human beings. So, we use their argument against them. I have to represent all the people. You sure do, and you're failing in doing that if you are pro-choice.
You know, Father, when people ask me about the life issue and how I am pro-life and always have been, I look at them and I say, this folks, this is a no-brainer.
Right.
Thou shalt not murder, right? And from the public point of view, we prosecute people who murder people. It's such a no-brainer, and yet we get the machinations of all these words and the legal documents and person or personhood or this or that, or it's sort of a baby, or maybe it's tissue, or well, let's breach it so that then the head doesn't come out first and therefore it's not murder. I mean, this is just madness. Thou shalt not kill. Okay, Judeo-Christian tradition is in our laws. And you don't murder in our laws. If you want to take the entire religious piece out of it, that you don't murder. We prosecute you if you do. We arrest you and prosecute you.
You know how the founding fathers said, in other words, that it's a no-brainer. They used the word self-evident truths. Self-evident means it's a no-brainer. It means you don't have to reason to it. A self-evident truth is a truth which, once you say it, it's clear that it's true. It's not the end of a syllogism. It's not the conclusion of some complicated argument with all kind of abstract concepts. It's just evidently true as soon as you say it. And some people say to me, "Oh, Father Frank, you spend your whole life in ministry, your whole day, day and night dealing with abortion. That must be so hard. You're dealing with such a hard issue." And I say, "No, I'm dealing with the simplest thing in the world. You don't kill babies." It's self-evident, and it's there's issues that are all kinds of issues that are way more complicated than that, and that I would not want to be in the position of people that are dealing with some of the complex issues that we're dealing with in our society today. But this one is simple. Now, we know the circumstances that lead a person to get an abortion. Oh yes, they're dealing with a lot of complications in their lives. Of course,
there's a lot of reasons behind it.
Yeah, and we're ready to help them. We help them every day. That isn't the issue. The issue is when you boil right down to it, can you kill a baby in order to solve a problem? And the answer is always no.
Mm-hmm. Let me go back just before we move on to Dobbs versus Mississippi, which I want to get to in the time that we have. You also made a very, very important point in your letter, your newsletter, your email, I guess, on Ash Wednesday, because I read it a couple of times. Some will claim that this is an, quote, some will claim that this is an inappropriate mix of religion and politics. And this is what you said. I am sick and tired of that worn out, meaningless argument. To the extent that the church cannot apply God's law and gospel teachings to the reality of the world, including our politics, she renders herself at best irrelevant and at worst complicit in the damage the Democrat Party is presently doing, unquote. Hold your thought. I'm getting a wrap. That's our first segment, Father, and we'll be right back. I want to pick it up on the backside and have you comment about your own writing on that. I thought it was spot on. I'm Terry Gilbert. This is Timeline with Terry. Be right back.
Welcome to Red Balloon, the nation's first and only free speech job site. I'm Andrew, the founder and CEO, and I'm excited you're here. I called this service Red Balloon because balloons help you fly, especially if you tie a ton of them to a lawn chair. A little bit dangerous, a lot bit fun, kind of like looking for a new job. The mission of Red Balloon is to connect employers who still love freedom and want employees who love freedom to the millions of Americans now searching for jobs today, where they won't have to look over their shoulders and constantly be worried about being canceled. There are over 10 million open jobs today, the most in history, people. It's kind of a moment. I always wanted to provide a job site focused on introducing employers to employees who will be focused on job performance and work and not politics. Come on, America. Stop canceling each other. Let's get to work. Visit redballoon.work. We'd love to have you.
All right, guys, you have signed up, right? You've joined freedomsquare.com. If you haven't, why not? This should have happened a decade ago. How did somebody not think of this earlier? If you're a business owner, we have a business directory to promote your business to patriots across the nation. So if you want to buy American, if you want to sell American, we have a business directory. Whatever it is, go now.
Join us in the fight for freedom. Welcome to Freedom Square.
When I walked into the studio today, somebody asked me, what does freedom really mean? And what does it really mean to me? I think there's one word for that: unencumbered. Our rights don't come from man. They don't come from government. They come from God. Therefore, we answer to him, and by extension, our laws have come through that Judeo-Christian tradition whereby we are unencumbered. If we are encumbered through man, government, which is large men, right, a bunch of people pushing us down, then we can't be the person that we were supposed to be under the triune God from the Judeo-Christian tradition. It's the unencumbered. That's what we want when we want freedom. I'm Terry Gilbert. You're watching Timeline with Terry. Welcome back. I'm Terry Gilbert. Our Timeline topic is on the life issue. And my special guest, very special guest, is Father Frank Pavone from Florida. He's the head of Priests for Life. Father, I just read you one of the quotes that you wrote. I thought you just nailed it. You just bowled a strike on this. To the extent that the church cannot apply God's law and gospel to teachings to the realities of the world, including our politics, she renders herself at best irrelevant and at worst complicit in the damage the Democrat Party is already doing. Christ never was up there and not in the streets with his message. He wasn't all up there. Politics is very much part of our theology and part of our ministry. And I'd like you to comment too, to so many of the priests that don't take this issue of life to the pulpit.
Yes, exactly. Well, you know, one of the members of our Priests for Life team is evangelist Alveda King. Her uncle was Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. Martin Luther King, the night before he was assassinated, he gave a sermon in Memphis, Tennessee, and he said this to the clergy. He said, I want to see a relevant ministry. He said, we can preach about the New Jerusalem. He says, but one day God's preacher has to preach about the new New York and the new Los Angeles and the new Memphis, Tennessee. He said, we could talk about, long white robes up in heaven, but we got to make sure people have enough clothes to put on here on earth. And he went on and on like that. Ministry has to be connected, as you're saying, in other words, with the real things people are facing, with the real choices people need to make. Because in all of the choices we make, and this is a basic tenet of Christian ethics and spirituality, every choice we make either leads us closer to God or farther away from him. There's no neutrality. We're either getting closer or we're going farther away. We're either obeying him or we're rebelling against him. So part of human choices are political choices. It's part of life. So how can morality and therefore spirituality not have anything to do with politics? It doesn't make sense. So people say, oh, well, religion and politics don't mix. Oh, yes, they do. And Jesus told us how they do. He said, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, but give to God what is God's. Caesar has to obey God as well. Both the Old and the New Testament tell us there's a role for earthly authority. It's a very important role. But those in earthly authority are not God. They have to obey God. So we, in the clergy, are not giving people the full spiritual guidance they need if we are somehow afraid to talk about political issues. Another way we can put it is, at the heart of the Christian proclamation is that Jesus is Lord. And so I say to people, well, is he Lord of 90% of your life? 80%? Is he Lord of everything you do except for your political choices? How can this be separate? It can't. So yes, we have to address that. And as far as addressing the theme of the protection of life itself, that again is right at the core of the gospel. Isn't what this is all about, that God has rescued human life and lifts up human life to his throne. In the book of Revelation, there's a beautiful, beautiful promise. Jesus says, to the victor, I will give the right to sit with me on my throne. So in heaven, we're not just going to be gathered around the throne. We're not just going to fall down before the throne. We're going to be seated on the throne. So if this is the destiny that God has for human life, how can the church credibly proclaim that on the one hand, and on the other, close our eyes and turn our back when that same human life is being thrown in the garbage by abortion and by any other act of violence for that matter? So we always need to be bringing that in as a practical application of the gospel.
Back to, and then we're going to move to Dobbs versus Mississippi, but back to the platform and the Democrat Party.
Yes.
You write, the platform on which we believers stand is neither the Republican platform nor the Democrat platform. It is the platform of Jesus Christ. And when a political party explicitly and deliberately contradicts that platform, time to leave the platform. So therefore,
Yes.
Father, it begs this question. Do you preach, and are you preaching on this show, and when you write like this, saying to Democrats that are still thinking that abortion is fine, and yet they call themselves Catholic or generic Christians, first party is the party of Jesus Christ, and that should define your politics and which platform you align with?
Yes, that's exactly right. We have the platform of Jesus Christ. He has to be our first loyalty. Now,
Right.
there's nothing wrong with affiliating with a political party, nothing wrong at all. But the point is that you evaluate what that party stands for, and it doesn't mean you have to agree with it. I mean, it's impossible. I don't know that any two people can easily agree with each other on every single policy that legislators have to deal with, because, I mean, every day new things arise, things we didn't even think of before. But it's the principles underlying those policies that are more important for us to agree with. You can have two candidates with very different ideas about national security, how to protect ourselves from terrorism, for example. But that's a very different thing than one candidate coming along and saying terrorism is a right and the terrorists have a right to do what they do. That's not what the debate is. The debate is we stand on the same principle. Terrorism is evil. We have to stop it. And then we have different policies to try to advance that principle. But when it comes to pro-life, when it comes to the question of abortion, the disagreement is not just at the level of policy. It's at the level of principle. Because when you're talking about should the law protect life or not, should we kill a baby or protect the baby, the policy is the principle.
Yes.
And if people can just
Yes.
grasp that this is a more fundamental dispute than just different ideas about policies. And when you look at the Democrat platform, it has gotten worse and worse
Yes, it
on
has.
the question of abortion. The most recent iteration of it, for the first time in 2020, they called for the elimination of the Hyde Amendment. Now, this enjoyed bipartisan support for 4 decades. It saved 2.5 million lives by protecting our tax money, or at least a large part of our tax money, from going to abortion. It's like now Biden himself and Democrat leaders in Congress are rejecting the Hyde Amendment altogether. And they're saying, therefore, that not only do they want abortion without exceptions, they want us to pay for it. You can't go along.
Well, then, Father, what do you say to those pro-life Catholics that perhaps are Republican or even independent, or Democrats that are leaving that party? What do you say to them when they say, well, therefore the church should be stronger about not giving President Biden communion? In fact, maybe the church should excommunicate him, because on the fundamental issue of life, where all things start from, I mean, if you're going to take a position on anything, it's the life issue, right? I mean, some people say, well, you know, we can disagree on all these policies and, you know, the 2020 election, there's a lot of things to consider. My response is, but I always start with the life issue, because that is the most important. It is so fundamental. It's the bottom line at the top of the page, okay? And to which they say, okay, then why doesn't the church get stronger with Biden and Pelosi, and for that matter at the time, Kennedy and the rest, who call themselves Catholic, who are members, baptized members of the family?
Right, right. Well, of course, that's our ministry. The idea behind Priests for Life is to help both the clergy and then the whole church to be stronger on this. So we agree 1,000% needs to be stronger. Now, first of all, we have to step back and say, well, who is the church? The church is not exactly the same as the leadership of the church. And a lot of the leadership in the church has failed on this. A lot of them are Democrats. That's part of the problem. A lot of them are afraid to offend the Democrat leaders. Why? Because the Democrat leaders are helping with a lot of the Catholic social programs and whatnot, and they're afraid that if they offend them, then they won't keep helping them and so on. And that's part of the dynamic that's going on. Other times, clergy are afraid to do anything here because they're just insecure and they can't take the criticism. They can't take the heat. Well, they're probably in the wrong line of work if they can't take criticism.
I would agree with that.
Right? I mean, because we follow a master who, how did it end up for him? He was crucified altogether. So the idea is that, we try to strengthen the clergy, and that's one of the reasons many people support our work. Now, however, the church is all of us who are members of the church. So when we say the church needs to be stronger on this, that is absolutely true. People who are feeling that, it's like we were saying before, people make a lot of sacrifices to live out their faith, and they want to see the others in the church and the leaders making the same sacrifices and supporting them, backing them up. We all have to be stronger. And the more we are all stronger, the more we are all outspoken about this, the more we put our beliefs into practice and that is actually the basis of my Ash Wednesday call for people to leave the Democrat Party. That's part of the church becoming stronger. Because if we start to see a greater exodus, and we have seen a lot of exodus over these years, recent years, from the party precisely on the question of abortion. But if we see that accelerate, and if they see that accelerate, people are going to start to wake up. Not everybody, but people will start to see, hey, the church is getting stronger. The church, i.e. the people of God, getting stronger.
And as you aptly put, when, the party leaders then would wake up because they're not listening now.
They're not. They are. It used to be better. Terry, when I got into this work with Priests for Life back in '93, there were dozens of pro-life Democrats in Congress. And we worked with them. We worked across the aisle. In fact, I remember standing in front of the Democrat National Committee headquarters, participating in a press conference in favor of a bill that Democrats were sponsoring to help moms who were pregnant to have more help so that they wouldn't feel so easily tempted to abort. They were doing some great things. And I have friends. I've been friends with Congressman Dan Lipinski for years. Now, he was, for a while, the lone pro-life Democrat in the House, or at least the strongest one. There were a couple of others that voted pro-life some of the time. And the party pushed him out. They didn't support him in his reelection. Now he's not a member of Congress anymore. So the number has gone from dozens down to zero. Now we have one still in there, but he almost lost his primary just the other day. Henry Cuellar from Texas. Hey, he votes pro-life, some of the time, not 100%. But he's the only remaining House member. 435 members.
Well, then isn't it time a person like him, or for that matter, any of them, switch parties? Because the life issue is the first, it's the rock, it's the fundamental, it's creation, it's number one.
Yes, it is the heart and soul of every issue when you think about it.
And everything falls from there.
It does. Why is an issue in the first place? Because it impacts human life. So, leaving the party for especially for a member of Congress, that's a very, very big hill to climb. But an issue like this, if there's any issue that makes it worth it, it's this one.
Yeah, but in fact, and now we're going to move on. Henry, his name's Henry. He's not in Congress at all anyway. Maybe had he switched parties, he might still be there, especially given he's from Texas, right? Which leans to the right. All right, let's talk about the big news that is happening this year, Father. Last year, December 1st was a big day in Washington, D.C., when oral arguments were heard on Dobbs versus Mississippi. And to our audience that doesn't know about that case, this is Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health of Mississippi. And the court listened. They are expected to rule on this. And depending upon where the rule is going to fall, either for life or not for life, if it falls for life, it could lead to, on a practical matter, an overturn of Roe v. Wade. I'll have you take the stage and kind of explain all that in not so much legal speak, but in lay speak, right after the break, Father. Hold your thought. We've got another break. All right, and we'll come back with Father Pavone. I'm Terry Gilbert. It's Timeline with Terry. Be right back.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell. Retailers, shopping channels, and now even banks have tried canceling myself and MyPillow. Well, during these times, your support has meant everything to us. My employees and I want to personally thank each and every one of you by passing the savings directly on to you. For a limited time, you can get my brand new product, My Slippers, for 50% off. That's the lowest price ever. And remember, My Slippers come with an exclusive 4-layer design. These layers combine to give you amazing comfort and support and help reduce stress on your feet. And with the durable indoor-outdoor sole, you can wear My Slippers anytime, anywhere. I personally guarantee these will be the most comfortable slippers you'll ever own. So go to MyPillow.com now and use the promo code on your screen or call the 1-800 number below to get My Slippers for 50% off, the lowest price in history. And if you do it right now, I'm going to include a free gift with your purchase. Thank you and God bless.
Charlize, luxury skincare for real women, because you're worth it.
Grits and Eggs Breakfast Kitchen, where every dish has fresh and delicious farm-to-table ingredients that are sure to uplift your taste buds. Experience our creamy grits topped with grilled shrimp in our homemade shrimp sauce. Try our fried whole chicken wings or our marinated lamb chops cooked to your perfection. Come try Costa Coffee. It's the best coffee you've never tasted. Grits and Eggs Breakfast Kitchen, located at 3205 Cumberland Boulevard, Southeast, Suite 105 in Atlanta. Grits and Eggs Breakfast Kitchen. Enter as strangers, leave as friends. Cheers.
The principles of liberty, freedom, and the tenets of our constitutional republic are under attack. That's why we are building freedomsquare.com. Freedomsquare.com, designed to unite freedom-loving Americans. Freedomsquare.com. Freedom lives here.
This is Timeline with Terry. I'm Terry Gilbert with Father Frank Pavone. We are talking about one of the hottest cases and hottest issues of this year, Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health of Mississippi. The Supreme Court heard oral arguments December 1st, and they can rule anytime. Chances are good, however, that they will rule by June at the end of this court's term this year. Explain to this audience in lay speak, Father, what that means.
Well, Mississippi passed a law protecting babies starting at 15 weeks into the pregnancy. For almost 50 years now, the courts have said you can't do that. At the time of Roe v. Wade, they said, well, the states can protect these babies if they want, once they become viable. And at that time, medically, that meant somewhere around 28 weeks. Today, it's as early as 22 weeks. These babies can survive with assistance outside the womb. But the point is, Mississippi said, things have changed. We know the baby better. We know more about the baby now than we ever knew. Things have changed. Pregnant moms have much more support in our society today by law, by cultural mores, by opportunities to pursue work and careers at home via the internet while carrying that baby, more than they ever had before. Things have changed since Roe v. Wade. So things have changed in the law. Safe haven laws, for example, where someone who feels she can't raise that baby can literally leave the baby at a safe haven spot, usually like a hospital, police station, firehouse, and no questions asked. The point that Mississippi was making is, yeah, we should be protecting these babies earlier in pregnancy, because common sense says the more protection you need, the more protection you should have. We've turned that on its head, and our abortion policy says right now, the more dependent you are, the less protection you have. It doesn't make any sense. So Mississippi pushed back. The court predictably struck down the law at the district court level. They appealed it. The appellate court struck it down as well. They appealed it again to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court took the case. And they're asking the question now, basically what the court is asking is this question: why not? Why can't we protect these babies earlier in pregnancy? And that's what the court is going to rule on. If they say, yes, we can protect the babies earlier in the pregnancy, that is the reversal of Roe v. Wade. Now, when they say we can protect them, they're saying we can. In other words, that it is consistent with the Constitution that we should protect them. And I think most Americans would say, well, why wouldn't it be consistent with the Constitution? Where in the Constitution does it talk about abortion? Nowhere. So what does this mean practically? It means instead of the court saying to the people, all right, when it says it to the states, it's saying it to the people and their elected representatives, you can't protect these babies. Instead of saying that, the court would be saying, protect them if you want. So the court's not going to make abortion illegal. The court is going to leave it up to the people to decide if
in
they
their
want to protect
individual states.
Exactly. Because right now, again, what people have to understand is they're not allowed to do that. And for no good reason. No good reason.
Now,
So
Father, I heard a very smart scholar say for Roe v. Wade to actually, and perhaps this is the wrong verb, be overturned, but the result of the decision on Dobbs versus Mississippi that would lead to Roe v. Wade being affected, two things have to happen. So correct me if I'm wrong, because I took real fast notes at the time and I'm not sure I nailed it, but I think I did. Number one, the court would have to go back in time in its thinking to 1973 and admit that it hadn't, the court, adjudicated properly at the SCOTUS level. And the second thing is, it would have to correct the court itself, self-correction, by putting the court on a correct track where it needs to be, by essentially saying, this shouldn't have been our case in the first place. Life and death matters are a matter of the states. So it would have to self-correct, and thus correcting the court's reputation. Do I have that pretty right?
Yes, you do, yes. And the court has done this many times. Of course, most famously with the question of segregation, right? I mean, and a longer time passed between those two cases, Plessy versus Ferguson, Board versus Brown of Education, Board of Education. A longer time passed there than has passed since Roe v. Wade. So we're well within the historical time frame of a court reversing a decision that was from long ago. Some people seem to think that because the decision has been in place for so long that somehow it's unchangeable. But no, if the court comes to realize that a decision is incompatible with the Constitution, then it's the only right thing to do is to change that decision and make it compatible with the Constitution. So this is what the court is wrestling with right now. And some people will say, like in fact during the oral arguments in December, some of the justices were saying, the more left-leaning justices were saying, but it would be, if the court reversed Roe v. Wade now, it would look too political because obviously, we know President Trump appointed
I think that was Sotomayor that said that.
Yes, you're right. Yeah. So, but the reality is actually the opposite. What makes the court political is when it takes or reaffirms a decision that has nothing to do with the Constitution.
That's right.
What we're saying is the opposite. The right to abortion was invented. It's not in the Constitution. So to correct that is not being political, it's being constitutional.
And getting back on track and
Yeah.
and putting the court where it needs to be. You know, Justice Roberts is a big defender of the court, the institution of the Supreme Court. How is this going to go down? Take a guess. And where will the justices fall on this, Father?
They are going to, from everything not only that I've been observing, and I read all the briefs, and I've been talking with all the attorneys. I even talked with the Attorney General herself in Mississippi, and all the legal experts in the pro-life movement. I've talked to them all. It seems that it's pretty certain that the court is going to uphold this law in Mississippi. Now, how far they will go beyond that in words remains to be seen. And I say in words because if in fact they uphold Mississippi's law as constitutional, then they have essentially radically changed Roe v. Wade. Because as we said, Roe v. Wade said you can't do that. You can't protect the babies that early. Well, now they've been changing that, which then opens the door for other states like Florida just did to do it and to have it upheld in the court. So I think no matter what else the court says beyond that, because they could go further and they could say, the whole Roe v. Wade decision is now reversed. But, they don't have to say those exact words in order for that to be the effect. And so I believe, as one of my legal friends said recently, they're going to do something either good or great. Either good or great. So we're on the cusp of a big victory. And we don't know when they're going to decide this. The term ends at the end of June, but they could decide it much earlier than that. It could come out at any time.
Good to great. That's very hopeful news. Let's talk about the fallout of that, though. There will be people that would think this is horrific. What do you think if this is a victory for our side? And I do hope it is. How do you see the fallout?
Well, the other side is going to say, as they're saying already, you're taking away, our right to abortion. And I say to them 3 simple words: make your case. The court is not taking away the so-called right to abortion. The court is saying, make your case. Because a state could still pass a law like New Jersey recently did that makes abortion legal throughout pregnancy. But in order to do that now, see, here's the difference, Terry. In order for the legislators to do that after a positive decision in Dobbs, they can't hide behind the court anymore.
That's right.
They can't hide behind the court
That's
and
right.
say, oh, no, we can't protect those babies because the court told us we can't. No, now the pro-abortion people, instead of just, pointing to the court, now they've got to point to abortion. And now they've got to make the case that it's a good idea for people to be able to tear these babies apart. They got to make the case that this is good for women rather than harmful for women. But that's one of the things we know now better than we did back at the time of Roe v. Wade, how damaging it is to women. And that's part of our work here at Preach for Life, is that we give voice to the women who've had abortions, our Silent No More campaign.
Right.
They tell us how bad it was. So it's like we're going to challenge the abortion industry and the abortion advocates, and we're going to say, are you going to listen to the voices of women whom you claim to serve or not? So that's part of the fallout is going to be that. Part of the fallout is going to be that the other side is going to introduce battles now in the state courts. Because remember, we have divided government.
Right.
We have a twofold court system. There's the federal courts, but there are the state courts. There's the federal constitution, but then there are the state constitutions. So the battle is very much going to be on the state level, where the other side will say, oh, well, okay, the federal court said that the federal constitution does not provide a right to abortion. But you know what? Our state constitution does. And some of them have already this battle's been going on in Kansas, for example, of all places. You wouldn't think a place like Kansas.
Where is Kansas on the issue?
Well, they're battling now with they found a right to abortion in the state constitution.
Oh,
So
really?
where did this come from? After all these years, it was there, but you didn't see it, you know? So that's where the battle has been. I mean, they've passed some great laws. I was with Governor Sam Brownback at the time when he signed the first, signed into law the first bill protecting babies from dismemberment abortion. So they've taken some great strides there. But of course, these are caught up in court. So the battle is going to be very much there, and that's going to be a lot of the pushback from the other side. Plus, you know, there's a big push on the other side for the chemical abortions. And I want to try to get this more into the private realm. And that's how they'll try to deal with it to escape the questions of all the legislation and the court battles. So those are some of the battlefronts.
And also there's the Plan B pill and all of that.
Right.
So, and that's a very private thing, very, very private thing. It's hard to know when a woman takes that kind of a pill.
Exactly.
Right. Moving on, in the time that we have, President Biden has nominated now a judge, Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Yeah.
What's your take on her? What do you think about her?
Very extreme. She's a partisan. She's a partisan Democrat, worked on the Obama campaign. In her work as a clerk for Justice Breyer, she was involved in cases upholding partial birth abortion. We mentioned before.
I read that.
And as a judge, she has struck down various conservative and Trump-supported policies. So she herself has been described, and I would agree, as a politician in robes. Now, we should look at this nominee from the broader perspective that this is a moment now. The ideological balance of the court is not going to shift.
That's
We're replacing
correct.
one left-leaning justice with another. So it's not as intense a battle as we had over Amy Coney Barrett or Kavanaugh. Right. But it says just as important, though, from this angle, the American people have to wrestle with the question, what is the role of a judge? And Amy Coney Barrett said this beautifully when she was sworn in her little speech. She said, you know, a senator has to make his or her views known on policy issues and has to advocate for those positions. A judge, to be a good judge or a justice, has to do just the opposite. Their personal positions, no matter how passionately they hold them, can have nothing to do with the way that they judge. It's got to be based on the law and the Constitution. That's hard to do, but that's the role, and she understands that as the role of the justice. We need that kind of person sitting on the court, but instead we see partisans who really are putting their own ideology into the mix. And it's a time also to consider what is the I mean, look at what Biden said about the criteria he was going to use. You know, I'm going to have a black female. Why in the world does that even matter? You should be looking for someone qualified. Now, maybe the most qualified person you can find will happen to be a black female. We have absolutely no objection to that at all. But the point is, why are you leading with this identity politics mindset?
Because he can, and he will, and he did. Speaking of Justice Barrett, and to your point, I was always struck growing up why our justices aren't like Lady Justice with the blindfolders on, right? But instead what we got, particularly from my point of view, with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, was her politics were wide open. She did numerous little conferences and interviews about what she thought. And I was always struck with that. Why doesn't she keep her mouth shut? Clarence Thomas is very mum's the word. And this does a disservice, I think, to the court. We should not know. Every case should be a new one that is plopped in front of their desk. And the cases that are taken, so many are discarded. They won't hear them. They won't read them. They won't adjudicate on them. But the ones that are, we should not know ahead of time. They should have we should believe that they have blinders on. Or I phrased that wrong. We should anticipate that they are blind to, that they don't speak their politics, that we don't get to know. We've got the blinders on, perhaps, about their politics. And they should rule on the Constitution with the case in front of them, each
Well,
and
this
every
is-
time. 1
This
minute,
is why
Father.
it was such a bad and dangerous idea when the Democrats floated this court packing notion, which of course they failed to gain support for, just like FDR failed way back in the 30s. It was a terrible idea. That they would, because they have control of Congress and the White House, let's put a whole bunch of new justices on the court so we can overcome what is currently a conservative majority. And what that does is that our nation now loses an independent judiciary. Now you've made the court into just another political tool. So you know what? If you're going to do that, then you might as well get rid of the courts altogether.
Why do we need that?
Because then it's nothing different than having just what we have in the Congress. Whatever party is in power, you pass their policies.
Right. We're down to about 30 seconds. I'll give you the last word. And before you give it to our audience, I want to invite you back. So have your PR people call me and nudge me, and I'll have you back. Go ahead, Father.
I would love to come back. And I just want to encourage everybody, the pro-life movement is a movement of love. We are not a movement of judgment. We don't condemn people who have abortions or who feel they have to have abortions. I want everybody to know that you take part in this movement, and we want to invite you all to do your part in this movement. You are taking part in a movement that doesn't point fingers of condemnation, but extend hands of mercy and help and hope to those women who think they need to have an abortion. Come to us. We will help you. To those who have had abortions, come to us. We don't reject you. We want you to have peace. Terry, that's our movement. And we hope.
And I would add the fathers as well.
The fathers, the whole family.
Because as we all know, it takes two to tango.
That's right. And the grandparents, everybody, abortion hurts everybody. We're here to help.
You're delightful to talk to. So smart and so learned and so insightful and so full of hope. I hope you come back. I'll invite you back. Have your people call me down the road, and we'll get you back, especially as we get closer to this decision in June, or even before that. As we think it's coming, we'll have you back. Thank you, Father.
Thank you.
It's been Timeline with Terry. I'm Terry Gilberg. We'll see you tomorrow on another Timeline topic. Thanks for joining us.